Have you ever stopped to think about what really makes the global economy run? Behind all the brands we see and the products we buy, there's this hidden digital engine, a silent giant that's running the show for the world's biggest companies. Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on that giant. So let me start with a question for you. What piece of software is so essential that 98 out of the top 100 companies on the planet rely on it? We're talking about the companies that build our cars, our phones, that get us our food. Almost all of them are running on the same thing. What is it? Yep, the answer is SAP. It's a name you might not hear every day, but it's a force that is quietly shaping pretty much every industry on Earth. So what does SAP actually do, right? How did this German software company become this essential, almost invisible infrastructure for global commerce? Well, it all boils down to three letters: ERP. And this analogy here is perfect, a central nervous system. I want you to picture a huge company as like a living thing. The ERP software is its brain and all its nerves, sending signals everywhere instantly. It's telling the factory what to build, it's letting the finance team see every single transaction the moment it happens, and it's tracking every single product moving through the supply chain. Before SAP, this was a total mess of different systems that would maybe talk to each other overnight. SAP made it all happen in real time. The story of how this giant came to be sounds like one of those classic startup tales, except this one starts in 1970s Germany. It all begins with 5 really ambitious engineers who decided to walk away from the biggest tech company in the world at the time, IBM, to chase an idea their own bosses had just shut down. So this was the spark, right? It's June 1972. Their big project at IBM gets the axe. But instead of just giving up, Dietmar Hopp, Hassel Plattner, and their buddies saw a future that their bosses just couldn't. So they walked out the door to go build it themselves. And the key here, the really crucial idea, was this thing called a real-time system. You have to remember, back in the 70s, businesses ran on mechanical punch cards. You'd feed these huge stacks of cards into a machine and then, get your reports the next day. The SAP founders built software that processed information instantly. This was a massive leap forward, and it gave their very first clients this huge competitive edge. So with this totally revolutionary technology in hand, this tiny German startup was ready for some serious growth. The next 2 decades would see them build an absolute empire and pretty much define the entire market for this kind of software. Let's just trace their path for a second. They start with R/1 for finance in 73. By 79, R/2 is handling manufacturing. But the real killer app was R3 in 1992. Just as companies were shifting away from those giant mainframe computers to networks of smaller ones, the client-server model, R3 was the perfect product at the exact perfect time. That one product cemented SAP's dominance for a whole generation. You can really think of SAP's whole history in 2 big acts. Act 1 was that mainframe and client-server era, totally dominated by their on-premise product R/3. But, tech never stands still. So Act 2 is the modern cloud era, which forced them into this massive strategic shift towards subscription services with their new flagship product, S/4HANA. And this transition, it was not easy. Not at all. For a company that was built on selling these massive, really expensive software licenses, moving to a subscription model in the cloud was a monumental challenge. It meant they had to completely reinvent their entire business. So, how'd they pull it off? Well, in large part, they bought their way into the cloud. Instead of trying to build everything from scratch, SAP just went on a massive shopping spree, snapping up these nimble cloud companies. That $8.3 billion deal for Concur, a travel and expense company, was a huge signal to the market. SAP was all in on the cloud, no matter what it cost. And you know what? Their big pivot worked. Just look at this breakdown of their global sales. Even though it's a German company through and through, its biggest single market is the United States. It is a true global powerhouse, just deeply integrated into every major economic region on the planet. The scale is it's staggering. Take a second and just look at that number. Over 34 billion euros in revenue last year. That number really represents the immense trust and, let's be honest, dependence that the world's businesses have in SAP software to run their most critical operations. But that kind of dominance hasn't come without some real controversy. Like a lot of global giants, SAP's history has a darker side, one that's marked by some serious compliance failures and bribery investigations on multiple continents. The public record shows a pretty troubling pattern. U.S. investigations found bribery schemes to win these huge government contracts in at least 8 countries, which led to a massive $220 million settlement just in 2024. And separately, the company also admitted to violating U.S. sanctions by illegally exporting its software to Iran. I mean, when you're competing for these massive multi-million-dollar contracts, the pressure is immense. But for a company that's built on being the trusted backbone of global business, it's a history that has repeatedly drawn some really intense legal and public scrutiny. So, where does that leave this invisible giant today? After 50 years of evolution, all the way from punch cards to the cloud, what comes next for the company that runs the world's business? And their biggest asset might just be their people. This isn't just software, it's a global city of talent. With nearly 110,000 employees, SAP has this huge pool of brainpower to try and tackle the challenges of a tech landscape that's changing faster than ever. Okay, so let's boil all this down. What's the big takeaway here? First, SAP is incredibly sticky. Its software is woven so deeply into how its customers operate that switching is almost impossible. Second, it's proven it can reinvent itself, making that incredibly difficult pivot to the cloud. And third, its future is really a battle on 2 fronts, trying to stay ahead of smaller, faster competitors while also managing the risks that just come with being that powerful. And that leaves us with the big question. The world is rocketing towards artificial intelligence, decentralized systems, and this whole new wave of startups that are trying to unseat the old guard. SAP managed the shift from mainframes to the cloud. But can this 50-year-old giant really transform itself again to dominate the next technological era? Especially when that means weaving something as complex as generative AI into the very core of business? Only time will tell.